Welcome to the Idaho Realtors Podcast, our association's podcast for membership, education, and outreach. I'm the IR Communications Director, Nick Stout, and I'll be your host for this week. Welcome to 2023 and Season 2 of the IR Podcast. On today's episode, I meet with Idaho Realtors Government Affairs Director, Max Pond. In our meeting, Max and I will discuss a kickoff to the 2023 legislative session, including discussing the Governor's State of the State address, how IR is active during the session, and providing a quick preview for Day at the Capitol on February 2nd. Thank you for joining us, and don't forget to visit our website, idahorealtors.com, for more information. Also, if you haven't done so, remember to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Hi, this is Nick Stout, your host for the Idaho Realtors Podcast, and I am kicking off our second season of the IR Podcast today with our Government Affairs Director, Max Pond. Max, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Nick. Good to be here.
Yeah. So this week, and we're recording this on a Friday, so it's probably not going to go out the same week, but this week on Monday, Governor Brad Little kicked off the 2023 Idaho legislative session with his State of the State on January 9th. They had inauguration last week on Friday, and we, because of you, Max, have a pretty significant presence at the State House during the legislative session. And I just kind of want to take the chance to sit down with you and kind of do a little overview and report about what's going on at the Capitol now. It's a little early, just kicked off, so there might not be as much to report this time, but I think this could be a good illustrative exercise for our members to kind of know what IR does for them throughout the legislative session.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yes, the legislature started out Monday. Kind of the general rule is the governor gives a State of the State at the hour of 1 p.m. at the first day of the legislature. Obviously, that's where he kind of outlines his budget proposals and kind of vision for that legislative session that next year for the state of Idaho. So. Lot of goings on, but like you mentioned, not a lot of bills quite yet, but some highlights kind of from the governor's State of the State, really kind of focused on, well, I guess to back up a little bit, we find ourselves financially as a state similar to where we were kind of last year. We've got a big budget surplus, a few different reasons for that, but we find ourselves with about a $1.5 billion with a B surplus this year. So many of the policy highlights, kind of that we saw last legislative session and the special legislative session that happened, the second time, in the summertime last year, were kind of included. Some of those same things were included in the governor's budget proposal, which of course are kind of the numbers behind the State of the State. As far as what specifically may kind of impact the real estate industry, we're always hearing about property tax relief, things like that. The governor has said that he wants to provide about $120 million to the legislature to really leave it up to them how they want to provide that property tax relief. But ultimately, the idea kind of would be to use those funds to pay down, bonds and levies kind of around the state. Thereby really bringing down property tax relief across the board for everybody. So it's not as targeted just for homeowners. It's targeted for all property tax payers throughout the state, which, we see equity in that, and that's good. So generally there's going to be, a lot of details around that, but that's kind of the direction that I've been hearing. I know that the legislature actually kind of wants a little bit more than 120. I'm not, they're going to try to figure out where they can come up with some more money for property tax relief. So again, those will be the details moving forward and kind of the sausage making process, which at least for me is fun to watch.
Are there any other big takeaways from the governor's State of the State address that you want our members to know about?
Well, again, the similar themes to last year, and as everyone here knows, the real estate industry really is kind of a value-added industry. So when we see proposals for transportation infrastructure and education investments, we see that as a positives, and those were certainly another takeaway from the State of the State.
Awesome. that was, my first of a series of questions I have prepared for you today. So I'm going to kind of go through these in kind of like a quick clip, just so we can make sure we can cover everything for our members. So my next one for you is, for IR, what are our main priorities during the legislative session? And specifically, I'm just curious, so you can kind of illuminate for our members, what are you doing to work to help advance them?
Yeah, well, I think, as I approach each session, there's, each session is kind of different, right? There's different variables, different considerations surrounding the session itself. One of the big ones this year, and I would hope that any trade association out, in the state would, if they find themselves in an environment like we are with, 40+% freshman lawmakers at the legislative level, at the state level, I see that as a huge opportunity for educating and education for lawmakers about our industry. They don't know what they don't know, and oftentimes they will tell you that themselves. So really, I think the number one priority this year for IR needs to be to continue to engage and really level up on that engagement. We do things from the state perspective, the state association perspective, to really heighten that. We have the SPC program, State Political Coordinator program, that's been growing. I think this is the third year of it. We've been growing members in each district each of those years. So really building that program out and providing that education is a huge aspect to our priorities this year. Now we have other ways of doing that. We have our legislative committee. We have many other members, not just SPCs, not just people on the legislative committee that are engaged in the process. So really heightening that, I think, needs to be our number one priority this year, due to the fact of where we find ourselves with all these new lawmakers. Mm-hmm. I guess to build on that a little bit more, again, Idaho Realtor members, we have members all over the state. They have practical knowledge and understanding of how to keep and drive, the thriving real estate market in their regions. Again, these lawmakers aren't necessarily experts like they are. So heightening that education, super important. So let's see, I guess the second priority obviously is going to be property tax relief and having an accurate and kind of well-rounded discussion with that whole legislative process there, because there's going to be a lot of people that don't know that we've tried things in the past that didn't work. And again, it goes all back to the education aspect. But really the third, kind of the rounded out, the third priority I'd say for this year is going to be some consumer protection aspects of what we want to push. There's some, I guess I'll say, shady things going on with some private companies putting 40-year liens provisions and transactions with vulnerable folks, and we see an opportunity to fix that. So we'll be pushing something like that as well.
The February Idaho Realtors courses are right around the corner. In February, Idaho Realtors is offering 3 different courses to assist our members. GRI 101, Taxation and Investment Property, is being held in Twin Falls on February 16th and the 17th. GRI 102, Professional Standards, Ethics, Risk Reduction, will be in Boise on February 22nd and 23rd. And Real Estate Law is in Boise on February 27th through March 2nd. If you're interested in taking part in any of these courses, visit our website for more information. Did you know that you can receive your ABR designation in 2023 by taking 2 courses offered by Idaho Realtors? In 2023, Idaho Realtors is partnering with Boise Regional Realtors to offer 2 courses to help members earn the Accredited Buyer's Representative designation. The first course, the ABR designation course, will be held on May 24th through 25th at Boise Regional Realtors. The second course, the Marketing Strategy and Lead Generation ABR elective, will be held on December 5th at Boise Regional Realtors. Members taking both courses will receive their ABR designation for 2023. Visit our website for more information. I kind of looking behind the curtain, you kind of talked about how there's always different kinds of legislative sessions. Something you and I are familiar with because of our background is that there's always kind of on years and off years, and it usually falls into whether or not there is a election or a primary election in May. Experience, usually the years where there isn't a big primary election in May is kind of where there's more of an opportunity to kind of get in the nitty gritty of, of new legislation coming up because, there's less pressure to kind of wrap up and get out in the spring. I'm just curious, do you kind of get a sense that this might be kind of one of those years where the legislature might be more interested to kind of take longer looks at some of these issues?
Well, possibly, but the other thing that we have to remember is, in November, the voters of Idaho changed the Constitution to allow the legislature to call themselves back into session. So
That's true.
I don't know what that does to the pressure valve in the building, but I would imagine it could be to let some of the air out maybe, but that is a new variable that we haven't really had to consider. So, just for folks that don't know, prior to November, the Idaho Constitution only authorized the governor to call a special session of the Idaho legislature. So now, 2/3 of the legislature can now call themselves back. So it's very, very interesting and obviously a different dynamic.
Sure. Okay, well, kind of going along, how does IR work with legislatures to advocate for our interests and the interests of realtors and home buyers?
Well, in a lot of different great ways. So again, member engagement, member education, super important, especially in the legislative process. Just to name a few things, and I did mention the state political coordinator program, but even before the session starts in early January, I was asked, and Idaho Realtors are always asked to provide an update to the Economic Outlook Committee, which is essentially a committee that is a joint committee. Both House members and Senate members are on that panel, and we're invited there to give an update on kind of a forecast and a kind of a review of the real estate industry in Idaho. And so that opportunity is great. That's an early engagement aspect of what we do. But in addition to that, like I mentioned, we have very active members on our legislative committee that meets every single week during the legislative session. We've got our state political coordinators program that are highly engaged with individual members in their individual districts. So there's a lot that we do. Obviously, I'm down at the legislature every single day. And so they see my face quite a bit too.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me too, because legislative members are really good about keeping track of who's who, and it's, especially in my experience there, they know kind of what work you're doing, who you're connected to, and they will keep track of that, which makes it easier to kind of interact with them and stuff. So
right. Well, and one thing I always say, as I go out and meet members all over the state, they talk to me about my relationships with different lawmakers and this and that. And one thing I always try to make a point of is, these folks, these folks get tired of me. I'm in their ear all the time. I'm trying to talk to them all the time. I'm grabbing them in the hallway. I'm grabbing them in the house gallery or whatever, but when they hear a cohesive and similar message from members in their district and their constituents, it really drives a message home in a very effective way.
Absolutely. I'm just curious, are there any issues or challenges before the real estate industry in Idaho that we're working to address during the session this year?
Yeah, well, it's kind of a perpetual thing. Honestly, the biggest, thing that we can have at least some sort of control on, and I mentioned the Economic Outlook Committee, I was in front of that panel and kind of spoke about some of these things, but as I talk to building contractors and realtors around, I think that there's still that, underlying problem of inventory in this state. I think, throughout the next year or so, we're not going to see 7% interest rates anymore. At least that's kind of what I've been able to gather from following NAR stuff and other economists out there. I think there'll be a slowdown, obviously, and I think people will admit to that, but But once we kind of get over the hump here, we're going to find ourselves right back in an inventory problem. So, I think that we can always just keep building. I think that's one of the biggest underlying challenges for the real estate industry here in Idaho.
Absolutely. How do you anticipate, the work before IR and our members this year? How do you anticipate working with the governor's office and legislatures for the session this year?
Well, I've spoken about this in the past too, but luckily, because of our membership and because of their engagement, we have this culture of engagement with the Idaho Realtors that was here long before I was here, Nick, and before you were here. So we've been lucky enough to come into this culture of engagement, and that's really what kind of sets us apart. Because the big thing is that we've got a seat at the table, and that's because of our members and their engagement, as I mentioned. So the best thing that you can anticipate, at least in this legislative process, not a lot of constants, a lot of variables, as we've talked about, but being a constant is being at that table, and we're happy to have that seat.
Well, and you do a tremendous job to, make sure that we are welcome to the seat at the table throughout the year, and by keeping up a great working relationship for Idaho Realtors and, our government representatives. So we appreciate the work that you do, Max. Before we wrap this up, I'm just curious, is there anything else you'd like to share with members about, the next month or two ahead with the legislature?
Absolutely. Well, it will start ramping up. You'll probably be seeing a lot more bills and stuff coming through committees. Next week on Wednesday, we'll have our first 2023 legislative committee meeting, which I'm looking forward to. And then, in early February, we've got Realtor Day at the Capitol, which is going to be extremely fun. We're going to have the state political coordinators have a nice little lunch with some lawmakers before the programming kicks off. I think we have to move the timing to 1:30. But then we'll go through and have our time with all three branches of state government, and then we'll kind of wrap up the day with a really fun, always fun, well-attended legislative reception at Beside Bardnay. I think that starts at 5:30. So obviously, want to encourage everyone to go to that. That's a great place and great opportunity to continue your engagement or to start your engagement. So really looking forward to that.
Well, and for individuals who might not be familiar with who we have join us for Day at the Capitol, I believe we're going to have a time slot available for legislative leadership. So that's usually where, Speaker of the House, caucus chairs, other important individuals in the legislature come join. I also believe we have Supreme Court Justice Robin Brody joining. Is that correct?
Yep, she'll be joining us. She's been great the last, I think this might be the fourth year that she'll be participating in this program with the Idaho Realtors, and she really brings a lot to the table and gives a great perspective on the judiciary, which kind of is can be a little murky of understanding for folks. So we're always excited to hear from her, and she's just great to have add value to the program.
Yeah, for sure. The judiciary is hopefully a branch of government that our members don't get to interact with very often. So it's always a great opportunity to kind of get her to talk. And then are there any other guests that we should highlight?
Yeah, obviously we'll be, I mentioned all three branches of government. So we'll have legislative leadership, as you mentioned, from both sides of the rotunda, Republicans and Democrats. Justice Robin Brody, as you mentioned, and then Governor Brad Little will be joining us as well.
Well, Max, I really appreciate your time today, and I appreciate you helping give our members this insight into the legislature and what's going on at the State House. Is there anything else we need to share with our members before I let you go today?
Just stay tuned. Nick and I are going to have a lot of content coming to your computers and your iPhones and stuff this legislative session. So stay tuned and stay engaged. And Nick, I appreciate you setting this up.
Awesome. Well, hey, Max, I appreciate your time, and we will talk to you later. Thank you for listening to Idaho Realtors Podcast. our association's podcast for membership, education, and outreach. Thank you to Max Pond for joining us. If you have questions about the legislative session or want to learn more about the SPC program, visit our website or contact Max directly. You can also visit legislature.idaho.gov to follow the legislative session directly. My name is Nick Stout, the Art Communications Director, and I was your host for this week's episode. Remember to visit our website and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider following us on your preferred podcast platform, liking it on social media, and sharing it with your friends and followers. Thank you again for joining us for this week's episode, and take care until next time.